We're here in the city of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love as it's called, in front of Independence Hall, the birthplace of the United States in a symbolic sense. And it was here in this square and this mall that's in front of Independence Hall that an event occurred on December 13th, 1860 that's important for our Profiles in Terrorism series. It was on that day that this entire mall was devoted to a giant rally called the Great Union that was attempting to head off the spirit of division that had erupted in the wake of the election of Abraham Lincoln in November, the month before. And the mayor of Philadelphia, Alexander Henry, called this gathering together to urge a spirit of compromise and reconciliation and appeasement even of the slaveholding republics in the interest of keeping the United States together and avoiding the revolution which seemed to be on the doorstep. And in this Great Union rally, there were speaker after speaker who urged to do things that would make the South feel more respected, do things that would make them not want to secede from the Union. Things were advocated by the speakers such as giving deference to the Dred Scott decision and other decisions of the Supreme Court, giving effect to the Fugitive Slave Act, giving money to slave owners who came to Pennsylvania. If they found their slaves here, it was suggested that the counties should pay a subsidy to them to help with their travels and to help them take their property back to the South. And it was very much of a spirit of, gee, the South feels wronged. We should do something to make them feel better about their institutions. And one of the speakers was Theodore Cuyler. Theodore Cuyler was mentioned in a speech that was evidently inspired by this rally that was written by John Wilkes Booth. And it survives. We call it "Allow Me a Few Words." And it's one of John Wilkes Booth's few political writings of his life, and it tells us a great deal about his thinking. In this speech, his entire theme is love. His entire theme is love for this country that I was born in. He was the son of an immigrant. His entire theme was, I would die for this country. There's not a man that wouldn't die for this country unless he's a traitor. And he talked in this about traitors, and he expressed a little bit of anger also, but his main theme was love, and he had some suicidal ideation about dying. But another thing that came through very clearly from this speech was his admiration and even inspiration from John Brown. He specifically mentions John Brown by name. He specifically mentions that he attended the execution of John Brown, and he specifically calls him the lion, in saying the lion is mightier than the fox. He's quoting from Niccolo Machiavelli there, but he's also indicating that John Brown was a man of action, and his actions are more noble than the behind-the-scenes politics that John Wilkes Booth thought was the scourge of the United States, the reason why the country was dissolving. Another thing that came through from John Wilkes Booth's "Allow Me a Few Words" speech is he really was condemning freedom of press and freedom of speech. He was saying, why should people be able to talk like abolitionists? It's very dangerous. It's very divisive. And those people are traitors. He called them traitors in the speech. And that is consistent with a whole line of thought that said we shouldn't talk about abolishing slavery. Just talking about it is causing problems. And that's an attitude that gave rise to terrorism. Because if you can't talk about solving a problem, then very often terrorism becomes the response. And in fact, for John Wilkes Booth, who considered himself, and he even says it in his speech, I wish I was able to argue things more smoothly. Ironically enough, since he was a man of the stage, if I were able to argue more smoothly, I could convince you. And he admits he won't be able to convince anyone. He was very skeptical about his own persuasive powers in this speech. And it was all inspired by the Great Union Rally that happened right here in Independence Square on December 13th, 1860. And that's why we're here as part of our Profiles in Terrorism series.